can keep this Onan running is to manipulate the choke. So we're going to take this carburetor apart and see what we can find. Okay, first step is just you can take loose 4 10mm screws here. We got 2 screws and 2 nuts. Nuts in the carburetor. We'll take this loose, pull this cover off, and get a little bit closer to the carburetor. Alright, let's see. So we just unplug this bottom wire here. Let's try to get this off. Electric choke, pull off wires. Then back here we got our governor linkage, throttle linkage. Slide it forward. That's not so bad. Alright, unhook that. Unhook the wire. Alright, so we got that off. The carburetor comes off pretty easy. Now we can see if we can't take it apart, do a little further cleaning. Okay, next step I'm going to do, I'm going to take the carburetor off, but I want to preserve this clamp because I think these are called Oaklear clamps. They're a one-time use, but instead of like a spiral clamp that are prone to get loose, these will not. And I've already loosened this up, so I'm going to spin the carburetor around and around until I get that filter completely off, and then I'll take the carburetor to the bench and we'll take it apart. Alright, the carburetor's on the bench, and this is out of a 2002 Winnebago with quite a few miles. I believe it's been sitting a while. Now you need a 15mm wrench to take this nut loose. I've already broke it loose. It was pretty tight, so I really held it firmly and got it broke loose. And we'll take the bowl off together and see what we can find. So that's already not a good sign. Saw that crud in there. Okay. Hoping to get this off and preserve the gasket. See it trying to come loose. If you don't stretch it too bad, sometimes you can reuse it. Okay. The bowl is off. Alrighty. And you got a little washer in there. Make sure you don't want to lose that. But our main problem is going to be right here, I believe. You see those little jets? And get that thing to focus. Yeah, it's not focusing too good. Oh, there we go. Let me clean my fingers a little bit here and get a better focus. Okay, now we got a little bit closer view, and you can see the crud in there, those little jets, because all the fuel that goes up into the engine has to pass through these little holes first. And you can see the crud. It's not getting. That's why the only way I could force it to run is keeping the choke on. But I want to explain also a little bit how these work, because you may wonder what's this knob? How's it work and what's it do? Let's get in focus. So when you're at 10,000 feet, you turn this knob in. So what that's doing, it's shutting the fuel flow off slightly. Because up 10,000 feet you have less air. If you have less air, then you also need a little less fuel, or you run rich. And what's happening is all the fuel that enters the engine is on the bottom side. All right, you see that little hole right there? So when that's put together, it's like this little washer I took out. That makes a seal at the bottom of the bowl. Then you got all the gases laying in the bowl, and all the fuel that passes before it gets to the engine, it's got to pass through this jet. And if I can get that, let's keep it in focus. When the fuel flows past this jet here, then it goes through that little opening right there, and it enters this little chamber where these little holes are. So then the fuel has to pass through these small holes, goes up, and of course, up into the main throat of the carburetor, into the venturi. Now this here is a solenoid. So when you turn off the key, it electrically shuts the fuel off. There's a valve in here that slides up and down that shuts the fuel off completely. So we'll get cleaning this a little bit better, get through it, and see if we can't get this engine running. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take this jet off the solenoid. You'll need a 13 millimeter to hold the solenoid and 15 millimeter to break the nut loose. And you'll see that little solenoid, it's kind of it's kind of moving kind of slow. So I'll get my carburetor cleaner on there and get it cleaned up. But remember, be mindful of all these little washers where they go, that you put them back in the right spot. So I'm gonna get me some carb cleaner on that, because I think that should actuate a little bit quicker. It's a little bit sluggish. But I take that out so I can get in and clean these jets out better. I can flow my carburetor cleaner through it really good. I'll probably let that soak a little bit because it's pretty dirty. Okay, just to show you what I'm doing here, spraying a little carburetor cleaner down in this. You can see it's working a whole lot better than what it was. It was really sluggish. Getting all that varnish and stuff out of there. That's another reason why you want to start and exercise your generator every month and run it for at least 45 minutes. But, run it under load. So that way you get all this old fuel out. Because it's going to evaporate on you over time. When it evaporates, it leaves behind all this slime and varnish. And then you end up having to clean your carburetor or buy a new carburetor or pay somebody to do this stuff. But you watch this video, now you can do it yourself. There's really nothing to it. Basic hand tools, a little patience. Also, another reason that I was told is you want to run your generators for a good 45 minutes to an hour and under load. Turn on your air conditioning units, because it also heats up the generator windings and helps push out any moisture that they may have accumulated. And I'm always sure that's a good thing too. So I got that going, operating pretty good. I've been letting this put sprayed carburetor cleaner in this cap. I'm letting that soak. Try to get all those little holes cleaned up really well. And I got me a little torch. I'll show you that here in just a second, what I used to make sure those holes are good and clean. Okay, something else I like to use these little torch cleaning kits for cleaning these jets out, because you want to have just the right size. You don't want to make the holes any bigger, but you can go around and at least make sure they're cleaned out good, get the varnish out of them. That's a handy little tool to have. Just go around, be patient, get them all cleaned out, and you'll have a nice, good running Onan generator, or any carburetor you're working on. All right, next I want to pull the float and the needle valve. If you look closely, you'll see one pin has like a little flat spot on it. It's a little bit wider. So you just take your pliers and give it a push. That gets the pin off. And you pull out your float. And there's needle valve. Looks pretty good. But I always like to flush this out good, because you can get a little speck of crud in there and can get on top of the needle and drive you crazy. I've mentioned this before, but whenever you pull like your fuel line off a fuel filter, you got those little barbs. I've had it tear off tiny slivers of rubber, and that rubber will work its way up and get on top and wiggle just on top of this needle valve. Sometimes stick it open and cause the flooding and all kinds of grief. But by back flushing it this way, and I'll hit it with my air compressor. You can see it coming out down here. I'll blast that with air here in a second, so I'll know it's perfectly clean. Now there's always a possibility this jet up in here could be clogged up, but they can be tricky to get out. I'm hoping this carburetor is not that bad. I think it's going to be okay, so I'm going to take my chances and not try to remove it. Blast it good with carb cleaner, let it soak a little bit. And you can see I was careful about taking it apart. I preserved this gasket, and everything else is these aluminum and brass washers, so I can put this all back together without buying any parts. I haven't torn any gaskets, so just give it a good cleaning. And these carburetors are expensive, so we'll try to clean it up and get it back together and get it running. Now you want to be careful. Some of these, I don't know if, no, this one doesn't. Okay, because this one has a rubber tip needle valve. Some of them have like a brass tip needle valve and then a rubber seat in the bottom. And if you blow air in here, you blow your rubber seat out. And that'll ruin your day, so you don't want to do that. Alrighty. So you may be wondering, what's this little screw do? Is that an adjustment or anything? No, that's just your drain screw. So maybe you're in a situation where you're going to be gone and you can't get to your generator to start it every month. So it's got to sit still for a few months. So open this up and drain all the fuel out of the bowl. And that's what that does. All that does is opens up the passageway from right here to there. So it drains all the fuel out of the bowl. So you're better off to leave the carburetor dry, because if you leave fuel in there, like I said before, it will evaporate out over time, leaving behind a varnish and sludge, and making for a bad day later on when your generator won't start. But that's what that little screw does. All right, getting things pretty clean now. I was about to put it back together, and I could think, actually, this is the first time I've rebuilt one of these carburetors. I believe on my Onan, I dropped the bowl one time, but I never did actually remove the carburetor. But as you can see, there's nothing to it. But something, I'm curious. I don't know what's behind this plate. So curiosity's getting to me. So let's find out what is in here. I just don't know. I guess I could pull up this part schematic maybe, but I'm already here. Let's see what we can find out. Try not to hurt the gasket. Okay. Well, more jets and passageways. That's pretty cool. Well, it's a good thing I opened that up. Okay, I see here. So we got those little jets in there. I mean, they look clean and fine anyway, because usually all your trash settles in the bottom. That's what gives you the grief. You can't get your fuel. This is going to be more for your idle circuit anyway, these little screws. But there's a jet there. So I'll spray some cleaner on there and make sure everything flows good. Well, I can tell that right here. See if you can see it in the throw of the carburetor or not. Yeah, I saw it spray down through. Okay. Got that little jet. So I'll blast that with a little bit of air too behind it with my air hose. So you just take your carb cleaner wherever you see a hole. Just try make sure it's clear. All these little jets here. Like I said, most of this upper stuff is usually fine. It's just the lower stuff that gives you the grief, where the fuel sits there and evaporates. Another tip is getting carburetor cleaner down here on your throttle shafts, because sometimes varnish you get in on throttle shafts and they'll kind of bind and don't operate real smooth. That'll get in there and dissolve that varnish off the shafts. Get everything operating good and smooth. All right, we're about ready for reassembly. All right, it's time to put this little carburetor back together. So let's just follow me along and we'll see how it goes. It would be nice if you've ever been around these ultrasonic cleaners. Man, they do a good job on the carburetors. If it was really bad, that's what I'd do, because I'm doing this at my home. We've got one at the shop. And, man, you can sit a carburetor in there and let it run for a few hours, and it does an incredible job of cleaning everything. All right. Got the mystery cap put back on. That done. Okay, let me blast that one last time. It's clean. All right. Make sure we're in camera shot. Put the needle valve in there. Drop it in. Remember, one side's a little wider than the other. Put that in. Give it just a little squeeze. Put some tension on it. Got that. Okay, remember we got this little washer. It has to go on first. But before I do that, let me, I need to put this on first. Remember how that sluggish that was working? See how nice it is now. And we want to put this on first. Because it seems like there's an issue when you put that together with this piece of aluminum hanging down. It gets in the way, sometimes getting everything good and snug. So our 15 millimeter here. Get a 13 millimeter. Better position this a little bit. There we go. And they like these little solenoids I was talking about earlier. A lot of lawnmowers have these too. And I think their technical term on the lawnmowers, they call them after-fire solenoids. You may remember years ago when you shut your lawnmower off, you'd walk about 10 foot away from it, then boom, it'd blow up. Well, what was doing is when you'd shut the engine off, the engine would continue to rotate a few more times, sucking raw fuel into the combustion chamber, but it wasn't getting ignited and burned because you've done turned the key off. Then it pumped all that raw fuel into the large muffler. And then it'd sit there, then it would pop, make a big loud noise. Well, in order to eliminate that problem, they came up with this idea. So the moment you turn the key off or shut it off, this plunger loses its 12-volt source. It shuts the fuel off. So even though the engine continues to rotate numerous times as it comes down to a full stop, it cannot suck any more fuel up into the piston, the chamber, and blow it into the muffler, that hot exhaust muffler, than to have it pop and explode and scare everybody. So that doesn't happen anymore, but years ago it used to. All right, where do we get to? All right, we have a little brass washer. Goes on here. Then we got our bowl. Then we got this little dude. Goes on there just like that. So which way is front? There's front, like that. So all there is to it. See, carburetor's not that complicated. It's just a block of aluminum with a bunch of holes drilled in it, you know. Getting the fuel to go in the right direction, the correct amount. Looks pretty good. Okay. I mean, in a lot of engines, I've actually cleaned carburetors with them on there. This one you can't do so well because of this big chunk of aluminum in your way. There's really no way to get this nut off to drop the bowl. But in a lot of small generators, different ones, I'm able to just leave the carburetor mounted to the machine, drop the bowl, clean this lower jet really good. That's the one that gets all the crap in it. Clean it out, put it back in there, and good to go. So if you can get that off and be easy and not break that gasket on the bowl, you can a lot of times clean these carburetors without buying any parts at all. Just be careful, take them apart, put it back together. So that's all there is to it. We'll go put it back on the Onan and see if it'll run. Now during reassembly, be mindful. Make sure you get that little spring. Put the little spring in that hole first. And make sure the spring stays down in this hole to keep the tension on your little linkage there. There we go. Plug up a few wires and a couple more screws. Just reverse process. When you put the cover on, make sure this gets connected. I've seen these crack and get brittle. Yeah, that one's getting cracked up some. That's your positive crankcase ventilation right there. And got that rubber boot here, so just when you put that on, make sure that all that lines up, that this don't get knocked sideways. Because if you did, you'd be ingesting dirt into your engine if that got bumped out of the way. Because you can see that hole is a direct shot into the intake, and it would bypass the air filter. So that's a very important piece. Okay, let's put her together. Okay, moment of truth. Will it run or will it be a do-over? Let's prime first. All right. Okay, prime it up, pumping fuel into the bowl. Maybe not enough. Well, as you can see, we're back on the bench. I failed miserably, but I'm not done yet. So, I talked about I didn't want to get into these other jets before, but now I am. So anyways, it makes for more thorough teardown. But in doing this, you gotta be very careful about you gotta make sure you use the correct screwdriver. Make sure it's got a nice clean edge. It fits the jet just right, because you only got one shot at this. If you slip and monkey up the slot on the jet, you're kind of done. So make sure you get a screwdriver that fits the jet really well. I've already broke this loose. So this is our idle circuit jet. The flow comes up through the top. And you see those little bitty holes down in there. And that's the idle circuit. So that's what that little jet controls. All right. Then we've got this one down here. We take out. I believe this is called the emulsion tube, if I remember back years ago. And then when that is in there, where's my, I believe, I think it's this one here. There's an air bleed. I know there's a passageway that bleeds air into this. Of course, you've got low pressure. It causes the vacuum to pull the fuel up into the carburetor. So the fuel passes through here. So I did the same thing. Took my little pipe cleaners, cleaned everything. Didn't see anything obvious. I was hoping I'd find something plugged. I did clean them all up. So then I got to thinking, all right, I think I know what I can do to make this work. Because this is a non-adjustable carburetor. And I got to thinking, okay, what can I do to make it adjustable? Because the jets are fairly clean, but I'm still running lean. So I got to looking at the flow of fuel, how it works. Remember how a flow is? We got our fuel comes up, comes into the float bowl, gets into this chamber. The fuel settles down into the bottom. Find me a pointy stick here. So all the fuel that enters that engine. Sorry, I got a phone call. It must first pass this jet right here. And then once it passes this jet, then it has to pass through these little holes. Then it has to go up through these little holes, on and on and on. So I got, okay, so this is our first restriction point. And this is our high altitude adjustment knob. Remember, like if you're high altitude, you can give it a little bit of a twist to make it a little bit leaner. So I thought, okay, what if I just remove this knob? So that's what I've done. It's on a spline, so I pulled it out. I had it off. There we go. All right. So I've removed that, and I've marked it right here, 12 o'clock position. So my next step, I'm going to take me a Dremel tool. I'm going to slot this. So I'm going to make this adjustable. EPA ain't going to like it. So I'm going to make this adjustable. I'll turn it in till it seats, so I'll know where factory position is. And then I'll back it out, clean it. But now I will have an ability to adjust the mixture on this thing on the fly. And I think that'll get us going. So let me get my Dremel tool out, put me a nice little slot here, and then we'll go from there. Okay, to show you what I did, I just took a simple Dremel tool and carefully went across the top of that after popping the plastic cap off of it. Maybe a nice little slot, so now I can get me a screwdriver on it so I can take a non-adjustable carburetor and make it adjustable. Just don't tell EPA. So now I want to figure out the kind of from the factory where it was sitting at, how many turns off the seat. So there's one turn. Two turns, but got about. Yep, okay, so we bottomed out. All right, so we're about 2 turns or so off the seat from the factory. So let's take it completely out, see what it looks like. Okay, so I'll take some carb cleaner to that, clean it up a little bit, blow that up well, and we'll start to reassemble this, and we will try this again, see if we can't get this thing going the second time. Okay, so it's reassemble time. So I've cleaned it up, Spray some carburetor cleaner in it. So put this back in the seats. Okay, that's so then from the factory we use about 2 turns. There's 1, and there's 2. All right, so I'm gonna take it about 2.5. I'm gonna make it rich. We'll go 3. I'm gonna put that back together, and then I can fine tune it, adjust it, then put the cap back on there. All right, now, so reassembling these jets. I got to remember, there's certain order we got to do this. Yeah, we got to put this one in first. It all looks good and clean. And I mentioned you got to be sure you got a screwdriver that matches. You want to make sure you got a screwdriver that catches both sides properly, because if you slip and booger it up, you're going to be done. You may never get the jet out. Okay. And we got this top jet. That one was problematic. It's very small. Remember, that's the idle circuit. Let me find what screwdriver did I use? Did that fit in there? I think I used something. A little WD-40 lube up those threads slightly. To make my life a little easier. Okay, now I need a smaller screwdriver because now I've lost reach. Where'd my other one go? It's a little bit skinnier. Oh, that's not it. Let me go find it. Okay, I found it. A little bit smaller. Okay, got her snug. All right. Got one last blast. Okay, now what? We need the float bowl. I mean, the float. It's like deja vu, isn't it? But like I've mentioned this before, the art to fixing anything or troubleshooting anything is to begin with understand actually how it works. You know, understanding the process, understanding the fuel flow. That's how I kind of figured out a way to make this adjustable, because I have to run it through my head and say, what's restricting? What is a restriction? Because I'm not getting enough fuel. Then it dawned on me, oh, this is restricting it. But then I thought, well, how can I make it unrestricted? Might as well pop the cap off of it, make it adjustable. And I'm thinking this will work. I ain't 100% sure. We can always buy a new carburetor, but I'm trying to avoid that. What else do I need? Okay, we need our pieces, parts. Let me put this on here. Where's find my tools. Oh, and part of my testing, I don't think I showed this. There's always another possibility that if you're not getting enough fuel, this solenoid could be bad, or if you're not getting no fuel at all. So I did check that earlier. I don't know if you can see or not, but you probably can't pick it up. But when you push that down, these little jets open up. And I did plug up the wire to it. It put it in start mode, and notice the plunger did operate. Because if that plunger doesn't go all the way down to open up those jets, that can also cause a fuel restriction. So, okay, I need another little washer. All right, let me find it. Okay, we found all of our pieces, parts. Okay, we found all of our pieces, parts. Put you on the bottom here. Got the little washer here. Saw spec. All right. Remember, so far we've done all this with no new parts. So if we can get this running, that would be pretty cool. Okay. All right. Well, this part's pretty boring. I'll just finish tightening these screws up. We'll go out there to the RV, bolt it up, and see what happens. All right, I want to go into a little bit more detail of what we're trying to accomplish and what's happening inside the carburetor. So hopefully I can convey it. Of course, here's the fuel bowl. There's that little adjustment knob. Remember, it only gives us a quarter turn. That's all we got. And if it doesn't help, it doesn't help. And we're trying to explain why it doesn't help. So here's a kind of a poor schematic. So of course, there's the throat of a carburetor, and here's our fuel bowl. Of course, we have fuel laying in the bowl constantly. Fuel pumps maintaining that level at all times through your float and through your needle valve. Well, that fuel, before it gets metered and up into the throat of the carburetor and into the engine, all that fuel must pass this needle valve. If it doesn't get past that needle valve, it's not going to get in the engine. So over time, what happens when we let our RV sit for a couple of months, because this carburetor is vented to the atmosphere, it slowly evaporates. So the fuel will evaporate down to nothing and just disappear. But it disappears, but it leaves behind a varnish. And so that varnish will make every orifice slightly smaller. So it's going to, instead of having this somewhat large gap to allow fuel to flow through, it's going to make it just a little bit more narrow. Now, if you had a conventional carburetor, we could actually adjust the screw, an adjustable carburetor. You could compensate for that by turning the screw out just a little bit more, allowing more fuel to flow through and make up to the engine and make the surging go away. But because we're limited with only a 1/4 inch turn, we can't do that. But with that little modification that I did, you can get around it and hopefully make your surging go away, and maybe even do it without taking the carburetor apart. That just depends on how dirty the carburetor is. Now, if you got a whole bunch of crud in there, this adjusting the screw out may or may not be enough in case you have some debris further up or down here in the bottom with all those other little orifices are. So anyway, that's that. And I just want to show you a little bit about prices on these carburetors. Check it out. Let me get back here where I was at. Here we go. Because you can see here, like here's one for the OEM carburetors are like $400. Sell even Amazon $381. Now you can get the China knockoffs for about $52 or so, but I have seen some poor reviews. People were warning about them. They put them on there and they surge and give trouble. So, and I did think it kind of funny. Remember when I was cleaning on that cleaning video I made, I was using tools like this to clean the jets and everything. So why on earth would you need something like that shipped with a brand new carburetor? That was kind of a little bit confusing, unless they figure you're going to have trouble with it and you're going to go in there and clean the jets out. Anyway, I thought I'd just point those few things out, and hopefully that will help you with your troubleshooting and repair. I also meant to mention the fact that these carburetors, they have no rebuild kits available. The only individual parts they offer is the fuel solenoid at the bottom. But all they offer is that solenoid and the complete carburetor. No internal parts, whatever. So when you take it apart, be careful. Don't lose anything, or you'll be buying a new carburetor. So I thought I'd mention that. All right, let's try this again. See what happens. Try to get a prime going on. that sound good. Try it again. All right, so we got it took care of. Now remember I talked about from earlier, we was about 2 turns off the seat. So now we're running about 3 turns off. So I'll just put this cap back on here. That on there. Oh, there she goes. All right, I'll get something to tap it on there all the way. And I think we're gonna have a working generator. So we still have a little bit of adjustment here, high and low. Let's see if you'll. So now you can see we've got a perfectly running good Onan, and with 0 cost, no parts at all. Just take it apart, clean things, adjust things, make things, and we're back on the road. So now you can too. Thanks for watching. Bye.